very banana business.
We talk about the things you think about. Today's topic is our favorite for both of us, and we think y'all will love it too. It's food. What's out there, what's healthy, what's perhaps not so healthy, what people consider healthy in different countries around the world, fitness, lifestyle, and to be more specific, what relationship food has with our lifestyle.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic, to be honest. And also, I think it's one where we can learn a few things from what's going on around in the world. And I'm sure, as most of our listeners already know, fitness is in vogue nowadays. Everybody's trying to get fit. Everyone's, going to the gym, or at least wants to go to the gym. A few of us even exercise at home. And you get the feeling that it's just not cool anymore to be unfit and to be out of shape in today's society. Sure, we can talk about the negative aspects, body image dysphoria and all that other, all of these other problems that come out of that. But it just seems like it's the age of fitness. You get all these fitness gurus, these influencers, and we thought it would be a great topic to step deeper into and try to find where it all started, how it all began.
Yes, this is awesome. Diet and fitness is like the new black for many. We're seeing all sorts of new diet and fitness trends coming out the past few years. Some are focused on the external aesthetics of things rather than internal health. Others are more focused on the internal health more. And of course, you have the hybrids of dieting and fitness, hardcore culture, protein shakes, gains in bulking and shredding, and all of that. But how far back did all this get started?
Well, that's the issue. I don't think it seems like it's fairly recent. By recent, I don't mean like a year or two, but I mean culture-wise, if we're speaking culturally, because this new trend of the fit or the ripped badass kind of hero, it all started I would say in the early 80s probably, with icons such as Arnold Schwarzenegger. His movies, and then you've got his physique.
Yeah.
It just became the age of the hero, or I don't know. Maybe it's related to the hero myth. I don't know. It could have been some kind of classical nostalgia to this masculine, strong figure thing. Because before that, if you check, especially the golden era of Hollywood, the black and whites, most of them were scrawny figures. None of them. I'm sure there are going to be some exceptions, but it wasn't very common. Most of them smoked a lot, drank a lot, and then all of a sudden you've got a movie like Rocky, where the whole thing is a training video where Sylvester Stallone runs,
Yeah.
drinks raw eggs. He's just getting
Ew.
getting it. Yeah, talking about raw eggs, actually, research shows that you'll probably get more protein and more nutrients if it's cooked, because your body can't digest as much protein when it's in its raw form, because of the process of denaturation when protein is cooked. So actually, if you're thinking of that, just go for the cooked eggs if you want more protein per egg. So Rocky didn't get that right, actually. But still, still he was the whole movie, that era in general, there was this it was physique dominant, strength, fit actors, fit actresses. So I think that's where it kind of became a mainstream thing, in my opinion.
It's funny when you mentioned raw eggs. We still have people, eating raw eggs, and there is such a hype about protein and getting protein, and yet I wonder, are we overdoing it? I watched what is that documentary called with all these plant-based eaters, athletic, famous athletic competitors, Game Changers.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole protein hype was a little bit explained where it doesn't have to be such crazy amounts. And I wonder, is that true? I wonder if protein is very hyped. I wonder if it's a market trend and that's why it's hyped. like certain vitamins that are, hyped up because it's a market trend and because it's expensive. So I wonder which of these researches do we trust? All these people are saying different things. And coming back to this, what we're talking about is, where does food come into play?
Mhm.
How do we get to this place of having so many different food culture clusters? I mean, we have separate food for every culture and region, but we can find just about any kind of food and cuisine at the palm of our hands in most part of the world. Has this played a role in our fitness culture of today?
Well, I think given the whole trend of, being fit, looking good, being in great shape, being strong and healthy, I'm sure that, food awareness is going to have to come at one point or another. And I think it's there, it's right there. Also included in all the hype of being fit. So, and I mean, it doesn't take a biochemist or a food scientist to show that there is, of course, a direct relationship between food and health and food and fitness, if you want to be a bit more specific. But if we dive into food itself and its history, of course, we can see the huge part the cuisine of a nation plays in the culture of the nation, and the type of food that the nation eats is usually related to its history. There's pride, there are all kinds of sentiments related to national dishes or traditional foods within each nation. But the funny thing is, if we go into history and we go even further in history, we can see a lot of what we would call traditional meals. Think of Italian cuisine, especially Italian cuisine of the South. I mean, the first thing that will pop in your mind is probably tomatoes, some kind of, tomato sauce, bolognese, all of these things. But imagine Italian cuisine without tomatoes, because this is from an evolutionary point of view, or maybe a historical point of view, this is quite recent. This only happened in the 1500s, when the European explorers went to America and brought tomatoes, because before the 1500s, Italy didn't have tomatoes, weirdly enough. And the same thing with Ireland and potatoes. I mean, whenever you think of Ireland, you'll probably think of potatoes. So imagine an Ireland without potatoes. And this is how it was before, just 500 years ago, which is, I know it sounds really, really long ago, but from a kind of civilization point of view standpoint, it's not so long ago. And the same thing if you think of all the other spices that we take for granted, cinnamon, pepper, turmeric, all of these, cardamom, caraway, all of these things, these weren't so widespread, just like you mentioned, with cuisine, international cuisine being around in all major cities around the world. This is relatively new, and it's also it gives us a future trajectory that food is evolving, food is changing. So yeah, that's what I think about it.
This is amazing. So if so many of our staple foods in Europe originated from the other part of the globe, so South America in this instance, what did we actually have here in Europe?
Well, I think you'd need to go really back in journals and other sources. But let's take British cuisine, for example. Yorkshire pudding, maybe, kind of, I don't know if Yorkshire
Shepherd's pie.
Shepherd's pie, also another British staple. A lot of these probably existed before the exploration of the Americas. But by the same token, they also most likely came from other places as well, because you've got, if we're talking about Britain in this case, you've got influences from all over. You've got the Angles, who came from Denmark. You've got the Celts, who were the natives. You've got the Romans, who at some point were there as well. Then you've got the Normans from France. So you've got all kinds of influences. And this is just one example of Britain. And I'm sure this applies to almost every other nation in the world. It's the same idea. Because if you look today at today's Britain and what British people eat, you can clearly see the influence of immigrants. So kebabs have become just as popular as, maybe even more popular than fish and chips. You've got tikka masala, you've got
Yes,
you know
yes.
Chinese food in all its varieties, dumplings, spring rolls, whatnot, and all of those things have, the British person now, the average British citizen, or let's say the average Western European American, doesn't even think of them as in the terms of Chinese, Asian, European. They just think of them as food available, and some people prefer Indian, some people prefer Chinese, some people just vary. And this is something that I don't think we've ever had this in human history before. It's something relatively new. And I think it's a pleasurable thing if you think about it. But it is recently, it's recent. It's not something that we had for a very long time.
Definitely, you want to try different cuisines. You don't even have to travel anymore if you're living in the more developed and cosmopolitan parts of Europe. Um, I want if I'm in England, if I'm in London, I want to try Indian food. I have a variety of Indian restaurants to go to choose
Hmm.
from, Chinese as well, and all kinds of other nations. Same goes for Berlin, for Poland. I mean, all these places have a bit of everything in the world. So to some degree, it's quite neat to be able to connect the world in such a beautiful way through food. But
True.
is it more than culture? What is the relationship between food and health?
Well, here is where it gets, kind of, I don't want to say controversial, but it can get a bit controversial because there are so many disagreements, and we'll get to those bit by bit throughout the episode. But I mean, yeah, sure. Of course, I would say there's a close relationship between food and health, and I think this kind of folk knowledge, almost everybody knows it. But and the thing with folk knowledge is it's there. Usually it is, generally speaking, right, because there are some maxims which are generally right. Don't eat too much, don't eat too much before you sleep. These general maxims, and they have some truth to it. And for me, I think the saying "you are what you eat" has a lot of truth to it, and a lot of cultures have been practicing this old adage, maybe more closely than other cultures. So again, it's a bit culture specific. Even the relationship between food and health is somehow you can still trace it to cultural differences. Because, for example, let's take Asia. Okay, we're just talking about Indian and Chinese food, but if you focus on Asia, especially
Mm-hmm.
the concept of yin and yang, hot foods, cold foods, and all these categorizations. I mean, whether you agree with them or not, whether they're backed scientifically, medically, or whatever, but the point I'm trying to drive here is that there is, or at least there has been for a very long time in Asia, this close attention to the type of food and how it affects or how it alters your spiritual or physical state. Because from a Tao perspective, maybe during a certain, if you want to feel less angry, you shouldn't eat that. If you want to feel more happy, you should eat that. And
Yes,
so
yes,
so
yes,
there
yes.
is this kind of awareness. Like I said, you could disagree all you want with it. That's not the point. But there is this connection between food and your spiritual well-being or your physical well-being. But in the West, I don't think. mm, I mean, historically speaking, I don't think there has been this same kind of vigilance when it comes to eating, at least from a quick surface look, I'd say.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, to think of it, the West is we're more we're more in the material. We're more into developing, raising the skyscrapers, opening new jobs, corporate world, technology. We're more advanced in that way. Whilst maybe the East, while they have their development as well, they do have ancient cultures and old beliefs, and they have some kind of magical, mystical stuff going on when it comes to the relationship between food and the spirit and the emotions and the healthy body, healthy mind, healthy soul, and so on. So I do agree to an extent that all of this is possible, and I have been noticing this in Western societies. We do try to be more conscious and aware of how and what we eat while we're following a fitness regime. So there is a trend of doing your fitness right and making sure that actually it's 20% fitness, 80% is your diet. So there is a how do you say it? There is a consciousness into how to do this for these sort of practices and trends. But as a whole, in other cases, maybe perhaps we pick convenience over quality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a good point. I think it's I think how you put it, it's because this is the real problem. It is a bit of an issue of convenience over quality if you think about it, because even the very mystical and ideal picture I painted of Asia, of course, this is, it's not true anymore in the Asia, at least in the capital, the countries where capitalism, especially countries with strong economies, China, Japan, Korea, nobody's got time to think about his yin and yang. I don't think to the same extent as maybe their forefathers did, because, they're on the run, the hustle and bustle of everyday work. They have to be there on time, the 9 to 5 office job, business meetings, and all that kind of stuff. So even their ancient tradition has been marginalized. So their societies have been westernized, if you want to use that word.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not as easy as it sounds to follow all the guidelines. And the efficacy of these guidelines too is another big can of worms. But if we want to sort of zoom in on the typical Western diet. So when we say the typical Western diet, we probably mean things like salami, I don't know, burgers, bagels, these kind of
all things processed, basically.
Very good way to put it. Yeah, lots of processed carbs, lots of processed food, canned food. This is what we would call a typical Western diet. And I mean, by now it's nobody's strange to the fact that almost all kinds of scientific studies have shown that it's a very unhealthy diet overall. It's got too much sodium, too much red meat, too much fat. And I think what's even worse than red meat is cured meat. The kind of salted and dried meats, cured meats, especially when we think of salami, for example, ham, these kind of things, because you've got all kinds of preservatives, nitrates, and there's lots of nitrates have been linked to cancer.
Absolutely.
In North America, you've got also the issue of high fructose corn syrup. They don't use it as much in Europe, but
they
put
popular. That stuff everywhere.
They do.
There's not one place where they didn't figure out how to put it and under different names. And I mean, it's a problem for them, I suppose.
True, and it's used quite a lot as a sweetener, and some studies have shown it's even worse than sugar. And sugar is not it's on its own, it's not a really good thing, especially if it's in high quantities. So again, you see this issue of, excessive consumption of carbs. I'm not dissing carbs here. Of course, we need carbs, but, the type of carbs you eat, it also makes a difference. Simple carbs like sugars or, very simple carbs. These aren't these probably won't be as... First of all, they won't even keep you satiated and full for a long time. Will just, your blood sugar will spike right after you eat them, just like how you feel after, a bar of chocolate. And then after that, just give yourself an hour. You'll feel just as hungry as before you ate the chocolate. So this is the issue. But for me, what's even funnier is when more specific diets or more local diets, let's say regional diets, such as the Mediterranean diet is mentioned. And whenever someone says Mediterranean diet, I think to myself, oh, I live in Libya. I live on the Mediterranean. So maybe they're talking about the kind of food I eat. But the fact is, it's usually very different. There isn't one specific term when we say Mediterranean diet, because there was this fad. I don't know if it was in the late 80s, early 90s. Everybody was promoting the Mediterranean diet. Oh, the Mediterranean diet, lots of olive oil, fish, tomatoes, wine. It sounded so ideal, like it's the cure to all our health ailments and all our
Yes,
health
yes.
problems. But then when you think a little closer, the Mediterranean countries, they eat quite a lot of lamb, and lamb isn't as lean as beef. I mean, beef, especially if you in certain chops, certain parts, don't have as much fat as lamb does. And also, you can't forget about the huge quantities of bread all the Mediterranean all the Mediterranean countries eat. I mean, in all their yummy varieties. Let's not forget, the giant delicious bowls of pasta. So it's, I don't know if we
I
could,
have to
if we could
interrupt.
call.
Sorry, here we're not dissing Italian cuisine, and no, we're both huge fans of pasta. We love it,
Love it,
love it,
Yeah.
worship it. Very
But
yummy.
that's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. Should we call it a healthy diet? Maybe it's an issue with I don't know, certain ingredients. You could make the case that olive oil is generally good for you. Fish, of course, omega-3, protein, low fat. Yeah, sure. But I don't know if we could generalize a regional diet if we say, it's great. And the same thing has been done even to Chinese and Japanese food, because when you hear what natives say, what the Japanese and the Chinese citizens or maybe immigrants say, they'll probably tell you it tastes nothing like what it tastes in their countries. I mean, I'm talking here about Chinese and Japanese food in the West, because of course I mean, it's only natural. There'll be some changes to make it more palatable for the local local taste. So it's I don't think it tastes anything like the original. So it's sort of funny if you think of it.
There's so many topics, you opened so many windows to this whole topic that I went down memory lane. On this topic, on the evolution of food, maybe about 10 years ago, I wrote a piece for not a newspaper, it was a magazine. And sadly enough, it shut down right before being able to publish this particular piece. The article was on the evolution of food habits. And I mentioned this exact same issue of overconsumption of certain foods. It targeted cultures that had a more or less healthier diet, but they introduced the introduction of the Western, the meats, the processed foods, the canned foods, the overly sugared treats and stuff like that. How it began to lead to diseases, the same diseases you mentioned above in some of those cultures. It was the overconsumption. So it's no surprise that we're developing abnormalities and severe health problems. In nature, we wouldn't have the ability to consume to this extent, to overconsume. We're overconsuming on enormous scale. We have whole industries to produce so much more food than we need. And so because we were never in a place of being able, today's market is allowing us to produce way more than we need. So we were never in this kind of position like we are today. It's almost maybe perhaps, I don't know, for some people it might come from a place of scarcity. We're afraid we won't have again because the world has gone through an evolution of several different stages of lack during wars, during famine, during, I mean, all these things that we've been through in humanity's history. So my next question is, what are the staple foods that different nations eat?
Well, before I answer that, just let me comment on because you mentioned a really, really important issue, the issue of overconsumption and scarcity, because in our current age and our current time, this is probably one of the few times, and I think maybe it's the only time actually throughout human history, where more people die from overconsumption than the other way around, than underconsumption or malnutrition, which is absurd if you think about it. There are, of course, few people who, the irony of it is that countries, more developed countries, have people dying of
of how do you call it, unaware eating and consumption and overconsumption, while you have the less developed countries that are suffering from malnutrition, from having less food. So there is a, can we say there's a disbalance in the way that in the world from this point of view? I mean, we can talk about all the other disbalances, but this one is a really interesting one, that one part is overeating, over consuming, and not natural stuff, and the other part of the world is missing, is lacking access to stuff in order to survive.
True, yeah. It doesn't sound fair at all if you want to think about it from a moral point of view. But for me, I think what the real weird thing about it is actually the number of those dying from being overfed is actually currently larger than the number of people dying from being underfed.
Jesus.
Which just shows you, it shows you that food has changed. And I think there's, if we think about the overall health of a culture or let's say a nation, just like you said, I think it does have some kind of connection to the staple food of a nation. Because if you want to think about it, if you want to be really rough about the kind of staple foods, mankind, let's say humanity overall eat, you could roughly divide them into grains, which would be wheat, barley, corn. I don't know if we could include rice, but usually they include it with grains. So rice.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some nations eat more potatoes than others, so maybe we could call it
True.
A staple food. I don't know. Beans. Lots of nations also, beans are an important part of the diet. Whether they're jack beans, like in
black
some areas
beans,
of
red
Latin
beans.
America.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or even chickpeas. I think Indian cuisine has quite a lot of chickpeas.
Yes,
they use it a lot. So yeah, we could say these are staple foods of different nations around the world. But I think if we want to be, again, I'm overgeneralizing here, but it seems that nations that consume more rice and use rice as their staple food, especially when we say rice, of course, we're thinking of Asia here.
Yeah.
They seem to be doing a little better than nations health-wise, of course, a little better than nations which maybe, or cultures which maybe focus more on wheat, barley, and corn. But again, I don't think this is enough to make a clear-cut deduction from this, because there are also other factors, I think, which contribute to the Asian diet being healthier than a Western diet. More fish, more vegetables, compared to meat and poultry. Not that the Asians don't eat meat, they do, but I don't think they eat the same quantities as the leading nations, because the last statistic I read, the top consumers of beef worldwide were, I remember it was the USA, Australia, Brazil, Argentina. I don't remember the exact order, but I remember these four. They ate quite a lot of beef per capita than anyone else in the world. So Asians don't eat that much meat, I think, and even when they do, I don't think they prepare it in the same quantity, or in the same. They don't prepare it in the same. I'm sure you're aware of, there's lots of sautéing,
of course.
There's lots of boiling, steaming, and you don't get as much deep frying and grilling in the Asian cuisine in general. There's also a lot of emphasis on freshness, maybe more raw food, smaller portions.
More often, more herbs and spices. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And I think if you trace these ideas, if you trace them long enough, you'll probably connect them to some kind of spiritual practice, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's Taoism, Confucianism. It's back again to culture.
Yes, indeed.
This relation. Yeah. So let's not even forget spices. There's lots of studies on spices, and they say they're beneficial, full of antioxidants, antiparasitic properties, antibacterial properties. I mean, unless you've got stomach problems, unless you've got, I don't know, acid reflux, or you've got a sensitive tummy, maybe too much spices would probably do you harm. But I think that this goes for almost everything. Too much of everything is going to do you harm, no matter what it is.
Yes.
But I think that the last point here I'm going to make is, for the sake of not sounding like a promoter of everything Asian, I've said Asian like 10 times by now. They do have some specific health problems, because if you check rates of gastric, by gastric I mean stomach cancer, in Korea and Japan and Mongolia, these three have the highest rates worldwide. So this, I don't think we can judge the health of a whole continent by the rates of stomach cancer. But this does raise a bit of a question. If their food is so healthy, if they're eating so well, if they're living so long, why do they have such high rates of gastric cancer? Of course, if you ask any specialist, any oncologist, anything about cancer, they'll tell you, it's never clear cut. There's genetic, there's environmental factors. So, it's not easy to decide. But if we are talking about environmental factors, food is probably one of these environmental factors.
This is a bit worrying, to be quite honest, because given one of their most famous traits is fermented food, to which I am a massive fan. Most things fermented. I'm either fermenting something in my kitchen all the time, or thinking of how to ferment something in my kitchen. Maybe perhaps quantities is a factor, because Asians are very famous for having all things fermented, and that should give me a sign to just kind of chill it. If there is an imbalance of consumption of different types of foods, if you're over consuming of one thing, this can also be a problem. Could that be the cause of many health issues?
Yeah, I think you just sort of zoned in on the culprit. I'm not sure if we could actually, because fermented foods has been, I've found this in more than one research paper, and they have connected, especially kimchi and other Korean classics. Too much of it has been connected to a few health problems. So
Damn it.
so maybe like you said,
Damn it.
maybe it's an issue. It's an issue of quantity, because I like fermented food too. I like all kinds of olives. All kinds of foods which are fermented.
We need to do a segment on this.
We definitely
Fermented
we
foods.
have to.
Wasn't it the lifestyle?
It's like,
wasn't it the lifestyle of humans before big cities and all of that? I mean, weren't we all living in like villages and smaller portions? I mean, more clustered cities was something that developed over time, right? Correct me if I'm mistaken.
True.
So it wasn't the hippie thing. Just simply hippies they were like, wait a second, this whole too many people in the city is just it's annoying. I mean, I hate it. I hate going to the city. There are benefits. A lot of shops are available at the same place. You can get some stuff done very quickly, but the negative is there's just too many people, and I think everyone is dealing with this fight or flight thing because of the overcrowding. I mean, I don't think we notice it because we've adapted to it, but some people do notice it. I've heard plenty of people say like, hey, I can't stand the city. I get headaches when I'm here. I can't sleep well. And then they go out into a less crowded area, whether it's in the mountains or smaller villages. A lot of young people are moving out of the cities and going to live in nature because of this overcrowding. So it's not just a hippie thing. It's a human thing. We're not meant to be overcrowded this way. This very big industrial way of doing things, it's perhaps not the most ideal for many people.
It's probably not the most ideal, but it's a fact of life that it's been here for about the last let's say 200 years, since the Industrial Revolution, the age of industrialization. We as much as nostalgia we might have for the olden times, we just can't pull back the hands of time. We can't go back. We can do it on an individual level, just like you're saying. We can choose where we want to live. We can choose how we grow our food, how we consume it. It's if it's down to individual choice, yes. But even this individual choice, believe it or not, unfortunately, it's a luxury that many can't afford. So, for example, the plumber, or maybe the minimum wage restaurant worker, or the janitor, or whatever it is, they don't have the luxury to just pack their bags and go live in a lovely natural environment. because there simply aren't enough work opportunities in the countryside. That's why people
Yeah,
moved
of
from the
course, of
countryside
course.
in the first place to the cities. So it's really hard. The hippies and not just the hippies, other communes or communities had this idea of this sort of, you've got the famous, I don't know if you've read about it, the kibbutz in Israel, when they
No,
in the
no.
50s. Wow, I think that's an amazing social experiment. It's very, very interesting. And they'd had something similar to this, where, Jews from around the world, they came and, of course, this is a very touchy and controversial subject. You could call it occupation, you could call it, if you want to see it from another point of view. But I'm talking about how they gathered each other and how they worked in communes, which were based on agriculture, and how they tried to get to a level of self-sufficiency. I think it was a great social experiment. There are many documentaries on YouTube. You can find this kibbutz community, how they lived. And of course, they were influenced a lot by socialist and communist ideas.
Sounds
But
really
I think
interesting.
if we go back
Yeah, go on.
to, yeah, it's completely fascinating, I think. But I think this is also, if you think of it, where our food comes from, and whether it's good for us or not. This has also been subject to fads. Every now and again you get one food. It's it's the Hitler of all it's the Hitler of all foods, and then suddenly it's really nice. It's a Nobel Peace Prize for this food, and I can just thinking like randomly here, I can think of two foods. I can think of milk and I can think of eggs. Now, for example, when I was growing up in the 90s, eggs were the bad boys
Yeah.
of food. Just 2 eggs. Don't eat too many eggs. Eggs are not good for you. Adults are not supposed to eat eggs at all. They have cholesterol. And because we were kids, we were kind of given a pass. It's okay. You can eat up to 2 eggs per day. And then now, all of a sudden, with the latest fitness and health trends, eggs are good again. Eggs are okay. You see bodybuilders. I know this is an extreme example. I'm no bodybuilder, and I don't think most of our
You never know.
But you never know. But for an active bodybuilder who's bulking up, 6 eggs per day, maybe not all with yolks. Maybe most of them are with whites. But this is completely normal, with some oats, a bit of blackberry, and gulp it with your protein whey, with your whey protein shake, and there you go. You've had like I don't know, almost 50 grams of protein per meal. So there are just so many of these things. You've got other food combinations, you've got diets, and then you've got this famous food for your blood type, and Damo, and it was so popular at its time. It entered mainstream culture, and then the huge scientific backlash, research papers.
It wasn't proven, was it?
So there was so much against it. No, they kind of, if we're talking about the research paper, they said there's absolutely no evidence that it works, and it's just pseudoscience. There's nothing.
But here's the weird thing: food combining, it's also not proven. I've looked for research papers. There's only one research, and I believe that it wasn't done with the same purposes. That I personally follow food combining. I believe in it, and it affects my body. If I eat food in the wrong combinations, my stomach reacts right away. I feel a body reaction, but yet there is no proof. So maybe. Yeah, I don't know. This is always weird when you open Google Scholar and you're looking for some kind of help and proof that someone else is experiencing this, that there have been studies on this, and you're not an anomaly. But there are plenty of books, there are plenty of people that follow it. I have friends that say, like, I get bloated when I eat this and this. I explain to them it's because of, hypothetically, let's say not hypothetically, but there is a theory that these foods that you just ate are not good together. But then the other person, my partner, doesn't have the same reaction. So it's very confusing. I get the reaction, someone else doesn't get the reaction, but a third person has the same reaction as me. So what is good for you is still the question. Sorry, carry on.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right, because I just remembered I have a friend and I've got a sister, and it's the same issue. They can't mix up as much as I can. And even when I know I've mixed up things which I shouldn't, I don't really feel I just feel a little heavy, and that's all. I feel a little heavy, a little bloated, but it's the comfort is. I mean, it's not proportional to the pleasure of eating
Yeah.
that stuff. You get the idea? It's nowhere near to stop you from
No, for
mixing
me, it's
it
the
all
other way.
around. In deep in
For me, it's
for
more
you it's
so
more
severe that I
severe.
love
So I think
hummus, but I can't eat hummus without suffering later in some way. The combination is brutal in the mixture. It tastes incredible, and it's a love. It's a huge love for most plant-based eaters and non-plant-based eaters, and I love it, but I can't eat it as often because when I eat it, I'm like, okay, I gotta know. This has consequences, and that could be a psychosomatic thing that we can definitely open up a whole kind of discussion in another segment.
True.
Psychosomatic symptoms because of what you believe. So definitely a huge place to explore oneself. And
yeah, it's a super interesting topic, that one too. But I'm thinking of another food, or maybe to be more precise, is drink.
yes,
Milk. When I was growing up, milk was, commercials of milk, strong bones, strong muscles, good immune system, vitamin D, fortified milk,
yes,
milk,
yes.
milk, all kinds of
80s, 90s,
commercials,
super colorful commercials of kids drinking milk and growing big as they drink the milk.
Yeah, exactly. And then at school, we have these little milk packets, and
Yes.
milk is good for you. And I don't know how many billions the dairy industry paid during that time, but it definitely was part of our folk, it's called folk knowledge or folk medicine, that a kid who doesn't drink milk growing up is a kid who is deficient in everything. But then, weirdly enough, I met some kids who never drank milk, and they're doing
Exactly.
absolutely fine. And then what's even more scary, what's even scarier, is when you see all the backlash now, and whether it's related to fitness, whether it's related to food and diet, and even the ethical and moral
Yes, yes.
backlash against the dairy industry, right?
This milk is not meant for you. It's someone else's baby's milk, and here we are, humans creating an entire industry. Not creating, we've created the entire industry revolving around impregnating cows constantly, making sure that they're constantly in a milking position, and once they've done they've served their time as milking cows, they go and become someone's burgers. And we're the only species that drink milk from another species, which is really weird. And yeah, so there's all this,
True.
like you said, there's a whole backlash from the community that is fighting for the rights of the animals, that is fighting to prove that milk isn't actually good for us. It can be damaging to our health. And then, from when you come from a place of you're a 90s or 80s kid and everything was all about the milk, it's quite confusing. Like, you've grown up knowing that this is good for you. You have older people that are still consuming a glass of milk per day. And yet studies that are beginning to emerge and say, like, actually consuming milk at an older age might not be really that good for you. So you don't know which one to believe.
Yeah. Actually bad for you because of
Yes.
because of the hormones. Not only is it unethical, just like you said, but the amount of hormones human children will get, and they will be affected by them. And there is research that supports this. It raises a huge question mark. How much hormones
Yeah,
did we
that's
drink
true,
as
because
kids?
in order for a cow to produce that much milk, they're producing a lot more milk than they normally should, from what I understand. And to be impregnated all the time, they also need to be shot up with hormones. It's worrying, because then we have a lot of women are developing all kinds of I recently came across this, I don't know if it was a study or we were discussing it. A lot of women have female hormonal issues. And some woman that I came across, she said, I was advised by a nutritionist to not consume any dairy products. And I was like, why? She said, because it's pumped with hormones, and this can alter our this can create a hormonal imbalance for us. I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. PCOS is very common amongst women. How come? I mean, I'm not directly relating it to dairy, but it's one type of hormonal imbalance that women often get. And it's considered a norm, like, you have PCOS. Oh yeah, most women do have PCOS, but yeah, we are consuming a lot of products that may be hormonally treated to increase growth or to increase production of milk or meat or whatever. So it definitely is a question mark of what is what is the best decision to take in these situations? Is it moral? Is it for your body? Is it for the world? I mean, where do we stand?
True. Yeah, with milk, the only thing I can think of is if we think of, if we're being really ideal about it, if we're thinking of a farmer back in the good old,
Yes.
village agricultural days, we've got this little farmer. He's got, a little field of crops, some potatoes, some wheat, some barley. He's got a cow, a few chicken. He's got a little sheep. Milk in this sense for him and his family is, completely
Yes.
understandable. He
Uh,
drinks whatever he can.
it,
He
it,
boils,
absolutely,
he drinks it,
absolutely.
makes some cheese. End of
My
story,
my
right?
my partner's family, like back in the day, his grandparents, they had their chickens, their cows, and their goats as well. And I inquired when I heard about the whole milk industry. I asked his family. I said, "Oh, so how does it work? Do you keep the milk away from the calf?" And she said, no, there is usually a leftover. From what she explained, there was usually a leftover. And I had talked to other people who had, back in their day, their grandparents' farms and stuff, and they said the same thing. There's usually a leftover milk, and that's what is used. It's after the calf has taken its share. So yes, there would be usually like a small amount, and it would not be overconsumed. It would make sense that you would maybe make 1 kilogram of cheese that would be for the whole family for 1 week. So it will not be that every day we would be eating cheese, or every day there would be eating meat, or every day there would be eggs, because nobody was pumped. None of the animals were pumped with hormones and to overproduce, whether milk or eggs, or so it was a very kind of, they would just take whatever is left of this, because it would be unhealthy to leave the animal and not milk it. It also, keeping the milk after she's fed the child can cause some kind of discomfort and even an illness, if in some cases, if it's left for too long. Again, I'm speaking from an unprofessional, unexperienced point of view. I just asked a few questions here and there to the ways that this was done back in the day. Like, how did your parents or great grandparents do? I know that my grandfather was bringing milk from the village when I was a kid. I think our neighbors, or even we had a cow at some point. But unfortunately, my granddad, rest in peace, he's not around for me to question him and bombard him with, how did you do this? No, I wouldn't say it was unethical. Back in the day, it was fine to have a cow. Like you said, it was the most normal thing for survival. It's today that's a bit troubling, the way that we've managed to secure ourselves with this over consuming of milk every day. You have cheese, even sometimes a few times a day, cheese and meat and eggs and all these things that we have to overproduce in order to overconsume. It's weird. And then you have all these health issues, and you're wondering, like, okay, where's the problem? We're eating like kings, yet we're sick as well.
Yeah.
And the peasants are eating less food. Back in the day, the peasants were not as sick as the kings, because the kings were the ones that were showered with luxury, all the meats and all the cheeses and all the nice stuff. And the peasants were eating very simple food. I mean, I'm obviously speaking about some aspect of history. We went totally off track. Sorry.
Well,
let's get back.
But I think the last point that maybe we can talk about is, the issue of, because I remember offline you were asking me about, market trends, what is good for you, what is bad for you. Can you just, repeat the question for our listeners so they can get to what you
yes.
were
Sorry,
asking about?
we were back on the. Basically, one day one thing is healthy, and the next day this thing isn't healthy. We can't 100% rely on what the external world is telling us of, this is healthy, that is healthy, we should follow this. Because, like I said, one thing that may be healthy for one person might not be healthy for the other. We have so much to learn about ourselves in terms of what's good and what isn't. One thing that I personally was advised to practice, and I thought I would try it, is a food journal. So basically write what I ate during the day and see how I feel. Kind of give an analysis. Okay, this food makes me feel bloated, that food makes me feel bloated, this feels good for me. Test and experiment with food and diets and with fitness trends as well, because not every exercise is meant to feel good for you. Some people are much better with slower exercises, others are much better with cardio. They say overall, cardio is great for everyone, but maybe body type is different. I mean, how am I supposed to know any of that for sure until I try my body and see what works best for me? and the constant change in the market trends and food, fashion, and health movements. They're so confusing. So what is really good for you? Who do we trust?
I think this is a fantastic question because just as we were talking generally about, milk, cheese, eggs, and these general foods which come into, under the spotlight, under the magnifying glass, and one day they're good, one day they're bad. I think the question you asked here about individual choices, and I think if each one of us tries this journal idea, imagine the happiness. We would be, so much better if we just knew what worked for each one of us, because I do believe we're kind of different in this aspect. Sure, we're all, Homo sapiens. We've all got a digestive tract, men or women. But I think what you mentioned here is really, really important, and I think we need to drive this point home here. And it's so intriguing because when you see the variety of individual choices, which one should we choose? Whose claims should we believe? I mean, they can't all be lying. Let's say one of them or two of them or a few, but all of them, I don't think all of them can be lying at the same time. There must be someone who's telling the truth. What if they're all telling the truth? What if what they're promoting has worked for them? Because in all fairness, some influencers and some fitness gurus and, foodies, they're actually quite forthright and honest about this. They say, this works for me. I don't know if it works for you. And I think this is really beautiful if you think of it, because they don't want any responsibility if it doesn't work for you. They're just promoting what worked for them. I'm being a little ideal. I'm talking about the honest ones. Of course, there are probably people who just do it for work. It's just an industry. It's just work. But if you just see the variety of diets, you've got the macrobiotic diet. Sounds quite scientific. You've got plant-based diets, all kinds of you're probably the expert here. You've got raw plant-based diets. You got honey. Once you mentioned something. What was it with leather? When you mentioned leather, and I was like,
leather?
What are you going to eat?
What do you mean?
Leather now? You said something
fruit
about leather, using leather or leather. No, we like cow leather because you
mean
about leather. I remember.
That's the
Honey,
vegan. That's
leather.
the vegan. So vegan. So there's so many varieties, like you said. So you have the vegans who are doing it for ethical reasons. So which means if you're vegan, you're eating all plant-based, and you don't consume honey, you don't wear or use anything that is made from an animal. But then you have plant-based, which may include honey, and it's not revolving around the ethics of your purpose of eating plant-based may not be for the animals, while veganism is mostly revolving for animal reasons. At least, I don't know, I came across a vegan activist who was giving his opinion on this very loudly all over Instagram. One is for ethical purposes, other is for diet. It really depends on what person. And then you have raw vegan, raw plant-based eaters. You have fruitarians. You have what do you call them? Pescatarians. Pescatarians are basically mostly they eat plant-based, but they do have fish, but no chicken and no meat and no eggs. You have ovotarians that allow themselves to eat eggs, but no other animal products. You have all kinds, and vegetarians, of course, that eat dairy. But I think it's a whole variety of and with intentions of what you want to do, how you want to try it. And people need to explore, people need to find themselves and figure out for themselves what is good for their bodies. Nobody can dictate that on them.
But you've also got the exact opposite extreme. You've got these paleo diets, and then one extreme version, it's just meat, salt and water. I mean, I like meat. I'm not denying, steak can be pleasurable once every now and then, but to just subsist on meat and
not only
salt and water,
and thrive.
It's insane.
And thrive on that kind of. That's why I cannot advocate and say you have to be this or you have to be that. Even as a plant-based eater, I'm happy with this diet. I feel great in it. But then you have, the extremists that come up and say like, no, you have to do this. You have to do. Look at their people that are thriving on meat, salt, and water. Who has to do what? How do you know? How can you be sure? Damn it.
Yeah, it was so absurd. It was so strange. I mean, when you see these people from both sides, whether we're talking about, the plant-based diets, whether we're talking about these paleo guys, the way they talk about how their life improved, their overall, quality of life, all the illnesses, that modern medicine and traditional medicine couldn't heal. They just sound so happy. It's hard to question their integrity and just say, oh, they're lying. And then you hear the same kind of claims also from people who
Yes.
practice fasting, right? You've got, again,
It's a huge topic.
it's a huge field. You've got intermittent fasting. You've got intermittent fasting in all its variations, whether it's 16/8, whether it's 10/14, I don't know, whatever way you do it. Then you've got religious fasting, you've got Muslim fasting, you've got the Orthodox fasting, you've got wet fasting, dry fasting,
juice fasting.
You've got so much variations, and the same thing. You hear all kinds of claims.
Yes.
I think you're more familiar with this. Tell us about a few claims, whether personal or from around your circle.
So fasting is something that I actually started practicing at a very young age. I started fresh out of high school. My initial reasons were to detox and lose weight. And I practiced it overall 10 years. It started with water fasting, and then I moved to dry fasting. Dry fasting is the less common one, when there's no food or no water, and you learn how to train your body. There's also juice fasting, which I haven't done. And the claims and the studies around this are that it can cure a variety of diseases. You're resetting the body. There are studies of cases of where people have cured early stages of cancer, diabetes. There are hospitals for fasting in Europe, in America, all over the world, where even admission for something so natural, is just to register is a huge amount of money. There are professions in this area where you certify yourself as someone who can monitor and you can take care of another person who is fasting. So I've seen it cure possibly chronic asthma. I've seen it cure severe back issues. I've read on quite a few cases that were cured of hormonal imbalances, diabetes. It goes on and on. This is definitely a segment that we can talk about, to all kinds of fasting. It's personally very exciting and very thrilling for me, because I've seen it's not for everyone. This is definitely me not promoting. It's not for everyone at all. It's very delicate. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of learning what is okay for your body, what isn't okay for your body. There's so many claims on how to do it, and the trick is to find yours and to be very careful in the process, because you can ultimately hurt yourself. And there's a lot of negative backlash on this, and it's with reason, because some people don't follow the delicate rules, and stuff can go wrong. But it's like anything. It's like any kind of practice. Some diets get backlashes too. A lot of people say, yeah, this is great, this works for me, and then someone will come up and make a YouTube video and say, this is a terrible idea, don't do it, I did it, it didn't work for me. That's exactly it. It doesn't work for everyone, and it has its own set of rules.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's a very personal and individual thing. It's not something that you can just randomly, try and see if it works or not. I think you need to come
Definitely.
in prepared. You need some expertise. You need some guidelines. Yeah, I'm also reminded of the keto diet. I've never tried it, but I've been a bit interested in it. I'm familiar with the more biochemical and medical aspects of how the body changes. But I've only talked to one person, and he said, the first few days, the switch, when your body, starts using ketone bodies instead of glucose, that switch, he said, is horrible. But then after that, the body kind of acclimatizes or gets used to it. But again, if you go to the research, there's so many issues. It's not as all rainbows and unicorns like it was first promoted, because when you go and see the claims and see the studies, it's actually highly recommended that you do not start a keto diet unless you have some kind of nutritionist or a doctor who's following your blood work. You need to see your electrolytes, you need to see your kidney function, you need to see your liver function test regularly. So you need someone who's kind of maybe a doctor or maybe a nutritionist with a medical background or something. So it's not easy. But people just think, I'll just stop I'll stop sugar and carbs altogether and just eat fat and
And is it
and steak
healthy?
and
You,
chicken,
you
and I'm
being
going to lose weight.
the medical doctor between the two, can you remove
That's the
carbs
issue.
altogether and be okay? I mean, we're not talking about survival. We're talking about be healthy.
Yeah, that's the issue. It's not very healthy because because at some point when your body finishes all its store of stored carbs, because your body stores glycogen, that's the form of carbs it stores. When you run out of that, your body won't have any other source of glucose, so it will start using your fat. But your fat doesn't, it's not, it doesn't produce glucose in the same way. When your body breaks it down, if you don't have any other source of glucose coming, if you're not eating carbs anymore, the whole metabolism is going to change. Your body will need to use some kind of other energy source, and it's going to start using ketone bodies. That's why it's called a keto diet. So you're kind of basically, it's like changing
I was
car's
just
engine
about to
from
say that.
petrol
Is
to
it like
diesel. It's a
changing
bit
the
like
engine
this.
of a? Yeah, I swear I was gonna say. Was it like
Were
changing
you?
the fueling system or the way the car operates? Because here in Bulgaria, you can change the car to a gas. So it can it. Yeah. You can
Well, is it natural
fuel it with
gas?
fuel, and once the
Mm-mm.
fuel is finished, it can
I've seen that.
automatically switch to gas. If it's adapted. So that's what I thought of as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very good metaphor. Yeah, that's basically it. That's what you're doing to your body, and this switch it's kind of traumatic to your body. Many people, go through they call it like a keto flu. It's 2 or 3 days of just a nightmare. You just experience a nightmare. Some people just give up at that stage. For some people, it's a bit lighter and they push through. But anybody who's going to switch into keto will go through this keto flu when your body transitions. And then even after that,
Yeah.
you're going to have a few deficiencies because you're not eating any fruit, you're not eating any vegetables. Especially, you can eat vegetables,
And
but only
yeah.
vegetables which are low in
It's
starch and carbs.
There was this show, I forgot the name of it, where they travel around the world. I think Zac Efron was the I think, yeah, it was called Down to Earth with Zac Efron. And not that I'm promoting the show, but he had an episode where they were in a blue zone. Blue zones are areas where you have people living over 100 years. So 100 years, so sentience. So they were in a blue zone in Italy.
Ooh.
And they were there with researchers who were researching why this was a blue zone, what made it a blue zone, what made them what was in their lifestyle that made them live over 100 years. And what they concluded was the people that went over 100 years, yes, they were already quite very old, and maybe some of them were senile and maybe not 100% present, but they did speak to one of them who was having a walk every morning and going to have a glass of wine. But one thing that was very important in their diets, that was more than everything else, was the carbs. They ate a lot of carbs. And, they were wondering until the end of the episode, how was this a factor? And I was very curious to see what other blue zones there were, and maybe we can explore this topic as well, because it's really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think the last two extreme examples I'd like to mention before we wrap this up regarding extreme diets is, I'm sure you're aware of the famous psychologist Jordan Peterson, and now his daughter is also a kind of a podcaster, YouTuber. And both, one way or another, they've been promoting this paleo diet of beef, water, and salt, and they've claimed, results nothing short of miracles. Jordan has said that his depression has, been better. His daughter says all her autoimmune system symptoms, joint pain, all the discomfort is gone. And on the opposite side, we've got the famous Egyptian comedian Bassem Youssef. He says the same thing. He says my knees are better, my joints are better, and he's on a plant-based diet. And I thought that was so weird. Like, you've got the same results and you're eating opposite stuff, and they both look happy. They're both promoting these kind of diets. They're it's amazing. It's part of their identities now. So who should we believe? The carnivores?
This is exactly what I mean. I'm curious to turn this to our listeners. What do you guys believe in? What do y'all think about this topic? Have you tried keto? Have you tried plant-based? Have you tried I know, whatever you've tried, we'd love to hear about it. Share away in our comment sections. We'll have to wrap it up, guys. This is it for today. And thank you for tuning in to another one of our Berry Banana episodes. See you next time. Bye. Wrap it up, guys. This is it for today. And thank you for tuning in to another one of our Berry Banana episodes. See you next time. Bye.